What do people call legendary? Is it to win the game? Is it the most powerful transformation in the industry or the whole country? If a person does something that is considered impossible, it makes us all admire him and strive to repeat his feat. And what can be said about a man who single-handedly managed to fight off a whole detachment of enemies? He becomes a legend. Unfortunately, over time many legendary events are forgotten. The people who did the unthinkable on the battlefield, and some of them survived, deserve to be told. Hello, Newsoldier in touch. Today we will talk about the soldiers who showed incredible courage and resilience defending themselves and their country. So, here are some incredible stories about soldiers who faced the enemy alone. Aníbal Augusto Milais. Conflict, the First World War. Born in Portugal in 1895, Milais became the most celebrated soldier in his country's history. At the age of 20 he left his village and went to the front, where he served in the 2nd Infantry Division of the Portuguese Expeditionary Force. The legend of Aníbal Milais began with the Battle of the Lys. Most of the Portuguese troops during the First World War were concentrated in Belgium, where they, together with British soldiers, defended the country's territory from the invading German divisions. During the battle, in which the Portuguese lost 1,938 killed and 5,198 wounded in just a few hours, Milais was one of the machine gunners. When the Germans began to pursue the retreating soldiers, Milais opened intense fire, as a result of which the enemy suffered heavy losses. Instead of retreating with other soldiers, he continued to fire, covering the retreat of the Portuguese and British under heavy enemy fire. Milais kept firing until he ran out of ammo. A few months later, Milais again single-handedly repelled German attacks with his machine gun, covering the withdrawal of Belgian troops into additional trenches. The troops reportedly withdrew without loss. For his heroism, Aníbal Augusto Milais was awarded the country's highest military award. Alvin York. Conflict, the First World War. The exploits of Alvin York are striking in the fact that he initially refused military service. The pacifist York had to be persuaded that the duty of a Christian in time of war was to fight, and he began to fight. In 1918, Alvin C. York, who led a small detachment, killed more than 20 German soldiers and helped capture another 132 enemy soldiers. It happened in the Argonne forest near the River Meuse in France during the First World War. An excerpt from York's diary shows his inner turmoil and courage in battle. For the time being, we think it's best to let Sergeant York tell his own story. Those machine guns were spitting fire and cutting down the undergrowth all around me. Something awful. I did not have time to dodge behind a tree or dive into the brush. I did not even have time to kneel or lie down. As soon as the machine guns opened fire on me, I began to exchange shots with them. In order to sight me or to swing their machine guns on me, the Germans had to show their heads above the trench, and every time I saw a head, I just touched it off. All the time I kept yelling at them to calm down. I did not want to kill any more than I had to, but it was they or I, and I was giving them the best I had. Alvin York returned home as a hero and was later awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. York's exploits were so incredible that France, Italy and Montenegro also noted his great courage. His stories were made into a movie starring Gary Cooper. Ben L. Solomon. Conflict, the Second World War. The US entry into the Second World War changed the lives of thousands of young Americans. Ben L. Solomon was drafted into the army immediately after graduating from college. He had the opportunity to never see the horrors of war. Serving as a dentist in Hawaii, a man could serve away from the battlefield. However, when the regimental field surgeon was wounded by shrapnel, Solomon volunteered to replace him. Solomon participated in the landing of the 2nd Battalion on the coast, which was successful. Nevertheless, it seemed inevitable that a massive counter-offensive should be expected. Soon the Japanese commander, Army General Saito, ordered all surviving Japanese soldiers to attack the American forces and die an honorable death. Solomon's medical station was deployed close to the coastline, which put him in danger in the event of a possible attack. Shortly after the start of the Japanese counter-offensive, the infirmary was overwhelmed with over 30 wounded. Solomon had to simultaneously treat the wounded and fight off Japanese soldiers who broke into the field hospital. Soon, the entire infirmary was filled with attacking Japanese. Solomon forced his men to leave the camp while he fought off the Japanese. The last thing the survivors managed to remember is how Ben El Solomon picked up a machine gun after the soldier who fired it died. He managed to hit 98 enemy soldiers before he himself was killed. Reportedly, 76 bullet holes were counted in his body. A Shakespeare quote comes to mind: "Cowards die many times before their deaths. The valiant never taste of death but once." Have you ever heard anything about Solomon, Alvin York or Anibal Augusto Milajes? Or perhaps you know other, no less amazing stories when one warrior went against 50 or more people and did not give up until the last? Share your stories in the comments below the video. John R. McKinney. Conflict, the Second World War. The Pacific War is often characterized as one of the most brutal campaigns American soldiers ever fought. Participation in the war is a feat in itself, but the Medal of Honor recipient Sergeant John R. McKinney deserves to be included in the list of legendary heroes. While fighting in the Philippine Islands, McKinney was part of a detachment tasked with defending approaches to positions from advancing Japanese troops. During the attack, McKinney was hit on the head with a saber. Despite his injuries, he grabbed a rifle, hit the attacker with the butt, and then killed another Japanese soldier who broke into the trench. Then McKinney saw that the machine gunner was wounded, and the machine gun fell into the hands of the Japanese. What followed next was nothing less than a feat. McKinney managed to kill 10 Japanese soldiers who were huddled around a machine gun, shooting 3 of them and beating the rest to death. In a bitter irony, the machine gun turned out to be inoperable, and McKinney was left with one gun against the advancing enemy. However, he managed to single-handedly stop the advance of the enemy. By the time reinforcement arrived, the battle was already over. At a distance of 40 meters around McKinney's position, 38 dead Japanese were counted. And now, let's go a little deeper into the history. Lonely Viking. Conflict, Battle of Stamford Bridge, September 25th, 1066. The Norwegians were retreating from the Saxon army. Their morale was broken, and they sought to quick withdraw in order to reorganize their ranks, while the enemy was breathing down their backs. Suddenly, a lone Viking appeared in the midst of the chaos. He fought his way through the retreating brother-in-arms and single-handedly marched against the Saxon army, standing in the middle of a narrow bridge, the width of which allowed no more than 3 men to pass. The Viking was a large man with broad shoulders, his head was protected by a helmet, and metal armor covered his chest. According to legend, he held back the enemy until his comrades formed a circle, enclosing themselves with a wall of shields. Subsequently, both sides of this conflict tell about the heroic efforts of the Viking. A lone warrior on the bridge brandished his hammer and killed anyone who approached him. He was unshakable in his position, despite the many arrows that hit his torso. Eventually, Saxon soldiers crept under the bridge and stabbed the Viking through the cracks in the deck. However, by that time, the lone Scandinavian had managed to crush at least 40 Saxons and gave the Varanians time to rebuild their troops. Saito Musashiba Benkei. Conflict, fights on the Goja Bridge, about 11 and 80. It is difficult to imagine everything that Musashiba Benkei had to endure. Not many movie characters can boast a similar biography. At an early age he joined the Buddhist monks of Japan until they expelled him for breach of discipline. Miraculously, his education as a monk intertwined with the study of the way of the samurai. It is known that after being exiled, Benkei, for some unknown reason, came to the Goja Bridge, where he began to kill every person who tried to pass. In the end, about 1,000 swords accumulated at his feet. Finally, Benkei was defeated by Minamoto no Yoshimoto and from then on became his vassal. For 4 years, Benkei and Yoshimoto lived outside the law, until one day they were surrounded in the castle of Koromogawa no Tate. Yoshimoto decided to end his life by ritual suicide, while Benkei held back the advancing soldiers under a hail of arrows to give Yoshimoto time to observe the ritual. Benkei's reputation was such that many soldiers were afraid to cross the bridge and engage him. In the end, the soldiers did not notice that the giant warrior, rumored to be over 2 meters tall, was no longer moving. Some of the soldiers finally managed to muster enough courage to come closer and make sure that Benkei was dead, but somehow still on his feet. That's all. When a person has inner strength and courage, he is capable of anything. Be bolder in life and you will achieve even the most incredible things. And we say goodbye until new interesting stories. If you liked our today's material, then do not skimp on the likes and comments. We really need them to make our videos even more interesting for you. Narrated by Maxim Nikulin for Newsoldier channel.